Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Trinis Abroad, the podcast where we explore and we discuss our real life experiences here in Canada. This episode is entitled Canadian Experience Required. In this episode, we're going to discuss how we got jobs after settling here in Canada, time frames, and what we did to actually get Canadian experience.
Job hunting as a newcomer is tough. You can send out over 100 applications and sometimes you may not even get a response. Unlike Trinidad, where you would send out applications and you would still get some kind of feedback, here in Canada, sometimes it feels as if when you send out a job application, it's just going into another dimension.
Okay, so let's get started with our first question. What was it like when we started applying for jobs during COVID?
So for us, our experience was a little bit different. So when we first landed, we were in quarantine. So we had to be in quarantine for 2 weeks. And because we were in quarantine, that was our number one priority. I remember spending several hours just sitting at my laptop, sending out countless applications. I used every type of search engine you can imagine, most of which was Indeed and LinkedIn. Lucky enough for me, I was able to secure my first interview within those 2 weeks. And that interview led me to have my first job in Canada. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, okay, I didn't expect this to happen so quickly. It was COVID, there was lockdown, restrictions. And I remember just feeling very fortunate that I was able to get my first job so quickly, given the circumstances going on in the country and in the world at the time.
Well, for me, on the other hand, I took 2 months to get my first job after landing in Canada. I was applying nonstop every day, day in, day out. Happy to say that it took 2 months for me to get my first job, but right now I'm in my second job. So that first job, I was in it for a couple of years to gain Canadian experience. And I was lucky enough to get a job within my field. So I was really fortunate for this, but this isn't always the case with immigrants who come to Canada. But now looking back at it, I'm really grateful. And because during COVID was a uncertain time, a lot of companies weren't really hiring. I know they were trying to hold back from laying off employees, but the industry that I got in was in high demand, so I was kind of fortunate in that sense. My skill sets were being used here in Canada and I was able to build work experience. Okay, now, so we are moving on to question number 2. Do you think the job hunt now is different compared to when we started?
I think it is way tougher now because at least 5 years ago, when I was applying to a lot of different jobs, and even though I got my first interview within the first 2 weeks, I was getting a lot of calls consistently. I was getting a lot of feedback. I find that now you can send out a lot of applications and you're just not hearing at all from anyone. So it is a little bit more frustrating because you're putting in a lot of effort to send out a resume and to not hear from, a hiring manager, even to just acknowledge to say whether you got it or not. It is frustrating. And I find like as a new immigrant who may be within that same boat or you're struggling because you're also feeling the same way, sometimes it might make you like second guess yourself, am I doing this correctly? Is there something else I should be doing? And sometimes there isn't a lot of information online to help you.
I totally agree. It's more competitive now. There's a lot of different people with the same or even more skill sets applying for the same job. So sometimes you may think in Trinidad, if it's you have a degree, you have a certain level of qualification, work experience, and you should be qualified for this job, it's better here to be overqualified because a lot of people here have more experience than you coming from different countries. They also have different levels of education. They may even speak French. They might have different skill sets that may be better than yours. So it's always good to pay attention to this. It's not a couple hundred people applying for one job. It's a couple thousand people applying for the same job with your same qualifications. So you have to be different. You have to try and stand out from the crowd and find a way to excel and make sure that the hiring manager sees your application. All right, when you land in Canada, the first priority that you need to do, and one thing you need to be on top of your list, yes, finding housing, but you need to find a job to sustain your life. And obviously, if you're moving here with family, kids, You need to find a job to sustain the different expenses that you need to spend in order to survive here. So it's very important to seek help, and as well as to apply as much as you can. And if you need help on different things, there's a lot of different resources online, a lot of different job boards. So you need to apply, because this is very important.
All right, moving on to the next question. How did you eventually break into your field?
So for me, it was a bit different. I guess Anjani, her field, she got a job in her field as soon as she landed. Yes. I got a job in my field, the field that I wanted, and the field that I had experience in, because I always wanted to get a job, settle, use my experience. But the field that I actually wanted to get into, it was a bit tough. It took, as I said, the first time I landed, I worked in one job for a couple of years, but I wanted to set myself apart, and I wanted to be in the field that I really wanted, and it took me a long time. And I was really doubting myself whether I had the work experience, whether I had the qualifications, whether it matters, whether the employers were actually seeing my resumes. So what I did is that I actually got certified in my field, and this is how we stand out from the other persons who are applying. You should get certified. Not a lot of people have the certifications within the different fields, and this is something that I will give advice to any immigrant moving here, is that you look up and you research the different certifications that Canadian recognizes. Not a lot of people have them. So for instance, if you're an engineer, get certified, join professional groups, network is very important, meet people just like yourself who are applying, who are on the same journey of getting a job in their field, rub shoulders with them, have conversations, see what they're doing different to you. And this is how you set yourself apart, and this is how I was eventually able to get a job in the field that I wanted. And also too, within these professional bodies of different fields, I was able to network with them, and they were able to tell me how to apply for certain jobs in different fields. And there was a small trick behind it. All these applications and all these resumes go through automatic tracking system. You don't think in your head that someone, like a human, is going through thousands of applications. It actually runs through software, and chances are you're not even beating that to have your application reach the hiring manager. So these are little small tricks that you can look up. Again, professional services, look up, join professional bodies of three different fields, and ask immigrants who have already gotten jobs, ask them what they did, and I'm sure they'll be able to help you out. Okay, so on to our next question number 4. This is for Anjani. How does the job hunt affect you mentally and emotionally?
So being a new immigrant, it does take some time to finally attain a job. Things are very different now in Canada. It's post-COVID. There are a lot of economic changes. There are a lot of global changes that are occurring right now that has had an impact and is still having an impact on Canadian companies. So sometimes when you're sending out resumes, you might feel that because you're not getting an answer, it's very frustrating. And at times you may feel like you want to give up and that you may never be able to attain a job having lived here. But I would say give yourself, at least 6 months. And that's why having a plan is important. So sometimes you might come here with high expectations as an immigrant, because depending on, let's say, the job that you had in your former home country, you may think that, oh, well, it's not an issue. I'll be able to get an equivalent job easily because I already had years of experience and I have all these degrees. But sometimes it doesn't work out like that. And sometimes you may be put into a position where you may end up having to take a job that has absolutely nothing to do with your field, or you might have to start from the bottom and take an entry-level job, and that's okay. And that's what I want to tell anyone who is struggling. You're not alone. It happens to all of us. But those first jobs are what makes you build resilience. And I would say don't ever give up. But those are the jobs, I would say, those level entry jobs, or even a job that you may not think in a million years you would ever have to do. That will help you get to the next level, help you build Canadian work experience that a lot of Canadian employees are looking for.
Yes, these entry-level jobs are very well respected here. No one looks down on them. Don't give up. Keep yourself resilient. There's always a job for you. The toughest thing is to getting your first job. Once you get that first job, I've realized, and we've discussed, that you actually will reach further here because of the different opportunities that will be available to you to move to different jobs, or even promote yourself within different organizations, regardless of how big or small this organization is. Always stick to your plan. Try to apply in different ways. Reach out to different people to network. Once you get over this hurdle of getting your first job, once you get that and you get Canadian work experience, you'll be able to see the different opportunities that are afforded to you. I've seen immigrants who struggle to get their first job. Everyone has a story. After they get their first job, they stop applying, right? No problem. They're in the Canadian work market, and employers actually reach out to them. They're getting calls now, and you're getting pulled left and right. People want you. You're becoming an asset. You're becoming a resource, and you're becoming well known, even on LinkedIn, Indeed. Just getting started may be a little difficult, but during that time, you have some resilience, have a strong support system, and also have a financial plan, because it may take some time, but once you get over that, the opportunities will be open to you. Also, too, here in Canada, a lot of people have side businesses because the job that they're actually in may or may not be their passion. So if you want to start a business or even a side hustle, just pick up some extra money on the side. It may be a hobby that you could turn into like a small business and make some extra money. Some people I've seen actually made their side hustles into a permanent job, starting a business, opening a business, and actually propel themselves further here. Because as I said, there's a lot of opportunities here that you may or may not realize, and there's also a lot of funding. We are in Ontario, and there's a lot of funding programs available to small businesses. So this is different routes that you may be ventured into, and this is something that you could also look into for yourself and for your family. Now on to our last and final question number 5. What's one big lesson you've learned about jobs here in Canada?
Your first job may not be the most ideal job, and you may not spend the length of time that you may have thought you would compared to maybe the jobs that you had in your home country. But I always say that your first job is the gateway for you to attaining a better job. It's the gateway or the stepping stone for you to advance yourself to do what you want to do, because Canadian work experience is valued and any job here in Canada is valued. I think as well for me, what I've learned is in Trinidad, when we hear about the longevity that someone has spent in a company, the average is at least maybe 5 years, 10 years. There are some people in Trinidad who spend their entire lives in the same job for the same company. And I remember when we first moved here, and in speaking with a lot of my work colleagues, and they would ask me, how long did you spend in your last, company in your home country? And I remember they were very shocked to hear the length of time that I spent. And what I realized is that for them, they tend not to spend a lot of time in one job because they're always moving on to the next. They're always looking for better opportunities because the job opportunities are vast compared to Trinidad. And a lot of more younger workers, I find that they tell me that on average they spend about 2 years in jobs because they're always looking for other opportunities and they're looking for better pay. And sometimes that can only come if you get a new job. And that's a big change coming from Trinidad, where, we tend to spend most of our careers in one company. I would say another big lesson that I've learned is that the expectations that sometimes you may have leaving your home country in hopes of coming to a new country to find a job that may be equivalent, you'll soonly realize that it may differ. And I think for me, I had a lot higher expectations for the job market when we moved here. For me, I was fortunate enough to work with a global company in Trinidad, and I had high expectations leaving that job to think that when I moved here, okay, all the jobs in Canada are going to be up to this standard and to this level. And then I slowly realized that, it's not always the same, and it wasn't what I expected. And I think what I've learned in the 5 years working, having multiple jobs now, working for various different companies, is that you can't compare jobs in Trinidad to that of Canada. They are different. And that's something I would tell anyone, just to realize that the expectations you may come in may not always be the same. And it's okay, because every country is unique and every company has unique culture and the way in which they operate as a business. And that's something that you find that you slowly need to let go of, especially like if you're holding on to that, thinking that it's going to be the same exact thing from Trinidad. The other thing I also want to add is that sometimes you might think, I had a good job in Trinidad. I was a manager, or I had a really, high paying job. I had my own private office and all these perks and all these benefits. Sometimes you have that expectation as well, that when you come to Canada, no, I'm going to have the same thing. I'm going to be a manager, have my own nice office. I'm going to have all these great benefits. And sometimes you realize that it may not even come to fruition. And sometimes you do need to start from the bottom. And I've met a lot of immigrants over the past couple of years, and they've shared their stories with me that a lot of them were managers. I've met a lot of persons who were in different professions, and they had no choice but to start over from the bottom because where they come from, their degrees, their education, their accreditations, it was not accepted in Canada. And that's another big thing to note is that you need to be very careful when you're moving to a new country. You need to do your research to determine, are my credentials accepted here? Is it the same or do I need to start over? And that sometimes is a reality for a lot of persons. And it takes them a little bit longer to settle into the same field because you almost need to start over. So that's something to be very, very cautious about, and that's why a lot of planning is important especially when you're looking for a job.
Next thing I want to add is like in Trinidad it's a little different. When you apply for a job, you go on Trini Jobs, or I think it's CaribbeanJobs.com, Trinidad Jobs TT or something like that, and you could kind of expect whatever job you apply for, it's in a relative distance, because I know that if you're living north or you're living like Port of Spain, you wouldn't apply for a job in San Fernando. The commute, maybe you could take the water taxi. But here, you have to be very mindful of how far jobs are, because Canada is huge. So I've applied for jobs and people have called me for jobs and it's 2-3 hours drive away. So I have to be very mindful of commute. So it may not be suitable for me, obviously. I don't want to drive 4-5 hours a day. You have to apply for jobs in your area and know the commute time, because this is something you don't want to be stressing yourself out working all different types of hours, because it will impact your work-life balance, because you will be in traffic for most of the day. So this is something that we always pay attention to when we're applying for jobs. How far is it? Because sometimes the attractive salary doesn't really, balance off with commute time. These are the things you need to consider. It's not Trinidad. Trinidad is a bit smaller. Here is way bigger than you will even think. So that's something you need to be mindful of.
On a good note, what I would say is for the past couple of years we've been here, we have seen what the job market has been like. We have both worked in a couple of jobs, so we have gotten opportunities to work for different companies. I find here that the work experience, you're able to grow a lot faster, you excel faster, you move up faster. Your first job, it may not always be ideal, but what you may learn in that first year will teach you a lot about how the corporate world operates, what work life here is like in Canada. And that's why Canadian work experience is also invaluable. You get that life experience. Having a couple jobs so far under my belt in the past 5 years, I've taken all the good that I've learned from all of them, and I found I have grown a lot faster and a lot quicker. And what I've been able to learn in 5 years here in Canada, I don't think I would have been exposed to that level had I stayed in the equivalent job where I was in Trinidad. And that's something that is invaluable. So I would say any job that you're able to attain, take those experiences. You may not like it may not be ideal, but it will help you go a long way, and you will see how fast you will be able to move up because you have learned and grown so much in a short space of time.
So this brings us to the end of our podcast. We really enjoyed having you and we really enjoyed recording this for you all, sharing our experiences about our stories, about applying for jobs, getting jobs, and how you promote yourself. Jobs here in Canada are a bit different to Trinidad, and it's something that we need to realize and be mindful. Applying for jobs does take some time, but at the end of the day, it's all worthwhile once you get your first job. Canadian experience, as Anthony mentioned, is invaluable. So that brings us to the end of today's topic. Thanks for watching. We are live now on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to check out the podcast, and our full episode of our podcast, including video, is available on YouTube. Don't forget to like and subscribe and join our Instagram page dedicated to Trinis Abroad. So bye for now, and we'll see you in our next episode. Bye.